Moscow, 2025. Somewhere in this city is Jan Marsalek, a man wanted by Interpol, charged in absentia by Austria, sought by German prosecutors, and completely beyond the reach of every European authority trying to find him. He moves freely here. He has been here for 5 years, and he is not coming back. Jan Marsalek was the COO of Wirecard, one of Germany's most celebrated companies, listed on the DAX, worth 20 billion euros at its peak, held up as proof that Europe could produce a fintech champion to compete with Silicon Valley. He spoke 6 languages, he flew private, he had access to circles that a payment processing executive had no business being in. And according to multiple European intelligence agencies, he was working for Russian intelligence while running one of Germany's most important financial companies. In June 2020, Wirecard collapsed. 1 week. Bankrupt. 1.9 billion euros that the company had told its auditors, its investors, and its regulators it held in accounts in the Philippines. Gone. The accounts had never existed, and within 24 hours of the announcement, so had Jan Marsalek. In a 2024 London court case, the UK Crown Prosecution Service stated that Jan Marsalek acted as the direct intermediary for Russian intelligence services, coordinating a spy network operating across Europe.
In München beginnt am Morgen der Wirecard-Strafprozess den mutmaßlich größten Betrugsfall in der deutschen Wirtschaftsgeschichte.
From one of the biggest corporate scandals in German history to an active intelligence operation running agents across Europe. How did a payment company become a Russian spy network? And how did nobody stop it until it was too late? Wirecard was founded in Munich in 1999, and its first business was processing payments for adult entertainment and online gambling, industries that mainstream banks refused to touch because of reputational risk. This is not a minor detail. The company that would eventually replace Commerzbank on Germany's most prestigious stock index started by doing the financial work that everyone else considered too dirty. That willingness to operate in gray zones, to handle transactions that legitimate institutions wouldn't, was baked into Wirecard's DNA from day one, and it never really left. Over the following decade, Wirecard expanded into legitimate payment processing as online retail exploded across Europe and Asia. Real revenues, real clients, real infrastructure. The fraud, when it came, was layered on top of a company that actually existed, which is exactly what made it so hard to detect, and exactly what made it so useful as an intelligence cover. A payment processor with genuine global reach is an extraordinarily valuable thing to control if you want to move money for sanctioned entities, run agents, or understand what flows across Europe's commercial infrastructure. Marsalek ran Wirecard's Asian operations, and this is where the story becomes genuinely extraordinary. The structure he used was called third-party acquiring, TPA. The concept was that in markets where Wirecard couldn't hold payment licenses directly, it worked through local partner companies who processed payments on its behalf. These partner companies were in obscure jurisdictions, the Philippines, Singapore, Dubai, their accounts entirely separate from Wirecard's, their operations almost impossible to audit from Munich. And the cash they supposedly held on Wirecard's behalf eventually totaled 1.9 billion euros. Documented internally by Wirecard, rather than independently verified with the banks that were supposed to be holding it. Whether this structure was designed primarily as a fraud mechanism, primarily as an intelligence infrastructure, or both simultaneously is the question that Marsalek's continued freedom in Moscow makes impossible to answer. But consider what a network of obscure Asian financial companies, controlled by a man with connections to Russian military intelligence, with access to payment flows across Europe and Asia, actually represents. It is not just a convenient way to hide €1 billion. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated financial intelligence operation. While Wirecard was growing and being celebrated as a German national champion, Marsalek was cultivating a network that had nothing to do with payment processing. He had contacts in Libyan militia networks. He socialized with figures connected to Russian military intelligence. He reportedly visited Wagner Group mercenary troops in Syria as a guest of the Russian military in 2017, while serving as COO of a DAX-listed fintech company. At Wirecard board dinners, he discussed Russian military nerve agents with technical detail that suggested access to classified information. He lived opposite the Russian consulate in Munich. According to investigators, he had been visiting Russia more than 60 times in the decade before Wirecard collapsed. None of this was hidden. All of it was visible to anyone who looked. The question of why nobody looked? Why Germany's financial regulator, its intelligence services, its auditors, and its politicians all failed to connect these dots is one of the most important questions in the entire Wirecard story, and we will come back to it. The single detail that crystallizes everything about Marsalek is what has become known as the nerve agent dinner. At a Wirecard-related social event, Marsalek reportedly produced documentation about the Novichok nerve agent used in the 2018 Salisbury poisoning of Sergei Skripal and discussed the operation in technical detail that only someone with access to classified Russian intelligence would possess. The core of the Wirecard fraud was elegantly simple. The company told its auditors it held 1.9 billion euros in cash in escrow accounts in the Philippines, managed by local partner companies through the TPA structure. EY, Ernst and Young, one of the big four accounting firms, audited Wirecard for 10 years. For 10 years, they accepted Wirecard's internal documentation for this 1.9 billion rather than performing the most basic verification procedure in auditing, confirming cash balances directly with the bank holding them. When EY finally did contact the Philippine banks in 2020, the bank said they had no accounts, no relationship, and no knowledge of Wirecard whatsoever. The accounts had never existed, and EY had spent a decade not making a single phone call that would have established this in 20 minutes. The scale of EY's failure is almost as extraordinary as the fraud itself. The German accounting oversight body subsequently found serious failures in EY's work. Multiple lawsuits from Wirecard creditors and investors followed. The firm that was paid to verify the numbers had verified nothing. And 1.9 billion euros in fictional cash had sat on Wirecard's balance sheet, signed off year after year, while the company's stock price climbed toward 20 billion euros of market value. While Marsalek ran the Asian operations where the fraud was hidden, Markus Braun, Wirecard's CEO, Austrian, quiet, always in black, managed the company's public face and its relationship with the German establishment. Braun positioned Wirecard not as a payment processor, but as a technology platform, a software company that happened to move money, which deserved a technology valuation rather than a financial services one. This reframing was central to how Wirecard justified a stock price that reflected enormous future growth rather than its actual present financials. Braun appeared on magazine covers. He met with politicians. He was invited to Davos. And while he was building the facade, Marsalek was running the operation that made the facade possible. Braun has maintained throughout the subsequent criminal proceedings that he was deceived by others within the company, that the fraud was conducted without his knowledge or participation. His trial in Munich, which German prosecutors have called the alleged largest fraud case in German business history, continues. But the full picture of what Braun knew and when cannot be established, while the man who ran the fraudulent operation sits untouchable in Moscow. June 18, 2020. Wirecard announces it cannot confirm the whereabouts of 1.9 billion euros that should be held in escrow in the Philippines. EY has refused to sign the annual accounts. The stock loses 60% of its value in a single day. June 19th. John Marsalek is suspended as COO. Within hours, he is on a private jet. His stated destination is Minsk, Belarus. A member of Austria's far-right Freedom Party, which has documented ties to the Russian government, reportedly arranged the jet. June 22nd. Markus Braun is arrested at Munich airport. June 25th. Wirecard files for insolvency, the first DAX company in history to do so. A company that had replaced Commerzbank on Germany's most prestigious stock index has ceased to exist in 7 days. 6,000 employees lose their jobs, investors lose billions. And the 1.9 billion euros is simply gone. From Belarus, Marsalek's trail leads east with a speed and smoothness that does not look like improvisation. Marsalek was extracted from Belarus to Russia with the assistance of Russian intelligence services. He lives in Moscow under FSB protection, has used at least 3 false identities, holds a Russian passport in the name Konstantin Bayazov, and regularly passes through the turnstile of Lubyanka metro station, a few steps from FSB headquarters, on his way to work. A joint investigation team tracked him in central Moscow for over a year using travel data, mobile phone metadata, and CCTV footage. He is not hiding. He does not need to. After fleeing to Moscow, Marsalek did not simply disappear into comfortable exile. He kept working. Through Orlin Rusev and the Bulgarian network you saw at the beginning of this video, Marsalek directed espionage operations across Europe. The first lesson is that national pride is a catastrophically dangerous investment thesis. Wirecard survived scrutiny for years because it had become a symbol of German technological competitiveness, something the German establishment was emotionally invested in defending rather than objectively evaluating. BaFin defended it, politicians promoted it, auditors signed off on it. The German government itself called it, after the collapse, the alleged largest fraud case in German business history. That distinction between what something is and what the establishment needs it to be is a gap that sophisticated fraudsters and intelligence services know how to exploit, and in this case it appears both were exploiting it simultaneously. The second lesson is that complexity is the best friend of fraud. The Wirecard structure, third-party acquiring, obscure Asian partner companies, accounts in the Philippines, cash documented internally rather than verified externally, was not accidentally complicated. It was deliberately architected to be as hard to audit as possible. EY spent 10 years not making a single phone call that would have exposed the whole thing in 20 minutes. That is not just an auditing failure. It is what happens when a fraud is designed specifically to exploit the gap between what an auditor is supposed to verify and what they actually check. Whenever a company's financial structure requires significant effort to understand, that effort is worth making before you invest, not after. The third lesson is the one that makes Wirecard genuinely unlike everything else we have covered on this channel. Corporate fraud and geopolitical intelligence operations are not separate worlds. A payment processor with global reach is useful to a state actor in ways that go far beyond what any conventional business fraud analysis would identify. The 1.9 billion euros may not have simply been stolen. It may have been moved, for purposes that have never been publicly established. Through a network of companies in jurisdictions chosen specifically because they were hard to audit, by a man who was simultaneously running a spy ring from his office in Munich opposite the Russian consulate. The due diligence frameworks built for conventional fraud are not designed to detect this. And until they are, the Wirecard playbook remains available to anyone willing to use it. Marcus Braun's criminal trial in Munich continues and is expected to run for years. He maintains he was deceived. Jan Marsalek remains in Moscow, free, working, protected, and in possession of answers that no Western court will hear as long as he stays there. When the trial opened in Munich, German press described it as the alleged largest fraud case in German business history. The fraud charges may eventually produce a verdict. The harder question, how a Russian intelligence asset was permitted to run a European payments giant in full view of every institution paid to notice, has no court date. And Jan Marsalek, who could answer it, is riding the Moscow subway. Most stories on Business Untold have endings. The founder goes to prison. The company is dissolved. The lesson is applied. Wirecard does not have that ending. The most important character is free. The most important questions are unanswered. And the gap between what happened and what has been accounted for is large enough to contain an entire intelligence operation that may never be fully disclosed. Next week, we are looking at Nikola Motors, a truck company that couldn't move its own truck, and a founder who went to prison for pretending it could. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and if this video was useful, share it, because the Wirecard story is one that more people should know.